Hi everyone, we're about to get started. You'll notice that there is an RSVP link both in the description of the video and on the slide that you're looking at right now. If you have not already RSVP'd, make sure that you do so. Just go to that short link and fill out that information. We'd love to hopefully get in touch with you after this, so make sure that you prioritize that. All right, and welcome everybody to our Applying to Google series today. My name is Jessie. I'm about to be off camera and not standing awkwardly in the corner this whole time. I will be moderating the event today. I am joined by 4 of our lovely engineers. Do you guys want to share your names here? Start down here.
I'm John.
Sakile.
Matt.
I'm Yinfu. Great, and so we will go into your questions. We can see that the chat has been really active, which is what we love. But before we dive into that, let me just show you the agenda really quickly, what we're going to go over today. So we are going to go ahead and do a warm-up video right after this. So this is YouTube. We do have some videos. It's only 3 minutes, and you'll see kind of what we're getting into today. Then we'll do some proper introductions, go into what the culture is like at Google, and we'll talk about the opportunities that are available for our graduating students who are looking for full-time. If you're interested in hearing about what our internship opportunities are, sorry, I keep jumping on a screen here. We do have some talks on that in about 2 weeks. So on the RSVP form, indicate that you want to hear about those, and we'll make sure that you get the links to those ones. All right, so just so you know who I am, because I won't be on camera today, here's a quick little introduction of me. Again, my name is Jessie. I've been at Google for about 4 years now. I made sure to select this picture so that you're all confident in my moderating skills. I've done this once before. Went to school at UCLA. I'm currently on the university programs team here at Google. Favorite thing about Google is definitely the number of teams that I get to interact with on a day-to-day basis, but also you can bring your dog to work. So if you're not a dog person, that might be a downside, but you can work it out. We have dog-free zones, but I am a huge dog person, so that was probably the biggest pro to working at Google. And my fun fact is that I am currently learning piano. Hopefully by the end of the series I can do a song or two, not right now. And before we get to our panelists here who will actually be answering the questions today, we're going to go ahead and show you a video of what it's like to work here at Google, and then you'll hear from the actual experts. So let's roll it.
So let's go into the office. Alright, so this is our garage. Basically, nobody's in here.
Hi.
Hi.
I mean, we were all a bunch of kids. We were, we were all somewhat idealistic in our own way.
I did not inhale.
We wanted to do things that made a difference in the world and that, that mattered, right? That were interesting and hard. We didn't start out as a conventional company, and we never followed a normal path.
What is our mission? Basically, we want to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful.
On the one hand, it was a perfect description of what we were trying to accomplish in search. And yet, it was also so broad as to leave the door open for all of the many, many directions we wanted to go in the future.
We set out to do something really useful for people, and all other things began to follow.
All right, so here we are, one of the elephants.
I don't think any of us possibly could have seen where this story was going to go.
It may sound nuts, but it's often easier to make progress on mega ambitious goals than on less risky projects. Few people are crazy enough to try, and those are usually the ones you want to work with.
What if distance wasn't a barrier to exploring our world?
Can we bring the internet to the 5 billion people who don't have it today?
如果世界上每一个人会说每一种语言，那会是什么情况？
What if everyone in the world could speak every language?
What if everyone could make a living doing what they love?
Everybody ready? Up, step, down, go.
Almost everything we do is an experiment in some way, shape, or form. Everything has some aspect of the unknown.
That didn't work at all, man.
You're probably going to fail a few times before you succeed.
And now the car is in control.
Google car in front of us.
we always tend to ask the question, how can we make it better? So there's always this sense of optimism and curiosity that you can make a difference.
If our ambition is to create products that have planetary impact, it's not good enough to just solve it for some people. You have to solve it for absolutely everyone.
The unifying theme, if there is one, is seeing something that doesn't work that well and trying to use technology to make it better.
Wow, I heard it. That is fantastic.
We want to get deeper into the problems that really matter to people and to the world.
Just because we've been successful in the past doesn't mean we're preordained to succeed in the future. That's why we need to keep on asking the big questions and work really hard to find the best answers.
So let's go.
All right, so now hopefully after you are all feeling super inspired, or as Jackson in the chat put it, it's hitting you right in the feels, we are going to go ahead and move on to introducing some of our real live engineers. This is not pre-recorded, this is happening live, so ask any questions that you feel, and I will try and get to as many as we can. But let's go ahead and do our official introductions here. So Yinfu, we will start with you on the end.
Hi, my name is Yinfu. I'm from a small town called Kearney, Nebraska, and I went to school at MIT. Now I work on a project called Firebase Test Lab. You can feel free to go Google it. My favorite thing at Google is definitely the people that I work with. They're really nice and really supportive, and there are definitely days where I make a ton of mistakes and don't want to come to work, but they've been very nice to me. So.
Awesome, and then we will just go right down the line.
Hi, I'm Matt. I went to RPI. I currently work on Project Wing, which is the Google drones. My favorite thing about Google is definitely the people I work with and the types of work we get to do. And a fun fact about me, I did my first Ironman about 3 weeks ago. So.
Ooh.
Hey guys, my name is Sakile. I went to school in Colorado. Colorado College is in Colorado Springs. I'm on the social toolkit team, which sprang out from like the Google Plus team. My favorite thing about Google is like the people I work with. We work with like very smart people who are always there to help and anytime. The fun fact is that I never actually thought like I would be able to get into Google, so it felt like a miracle to me.
And John, before you hop in, we're getting some comments in chat that the volume is just a little low, so I know it seems like we're close to the camera, but let's just yell at it. It's fine. It'll be a nice yelling environment here. So you're on, John.
Hi, I'm John. I'm good at being loud. So I'm in consumer hardware, and that's kind of a large, broad topic, but I'm an embedded software engineer. My school that I graduated from is the University of Saskatchewan, so in Canada, in the middle. And then my favorite thing at Google is, I think I put on that slide, all the free food. I have a lot of favorite things at Google, but that's a pretty good one. And my fun fact is I hike up mountains and then I run off them. So I fly off mountains.
Nice. So we're getting a lot of compliments on the volume now. Not a ton of questions rolling in, so I'm going to throw a softball one at you all to get started. For those of you in chat, this is the time. If you've got questions for the panel, go ahead and type them in there. Kat will try and get to a bunch, and I'll pull some out to ask the panelists. But the first softball one, and Yinfu, we'll start with you at the end and just run down the line again. If you could just tell me what a typical day looks like working at Google, or your typical day.
Okay, I'm not sure if most people can relate, but my typical day starts at 11 a.m. because I'm a night owl. So I come in and I do like a first meeting in the morning, and then I go eat lunch. And then I do most of my work in the afternoon. And Google also has free dinner. So I stay here for dinner, and then I go home at about 6 or 7. And sometimes if issues come up, I'll work at home. But most of the time, most stuff is taken care of at work.
Cool. We'll just go down the line. Yeah.
So I'm a bit more of a morning person. I usually wake up and get in around 7-ish, and then we have swimming in the morning, which is actually kind of fun. Then we go to breakfast afterwards. What we'll also do is there's other different fitness classes I'll do in the morning. Then I'll usually have a couple meetings first thing in the morning. We have stand-ups. Then just work through till lunch. I'll usually stay for dinner. And then
what are
head home.
stand-ups?
Stand-ups are basically like little 15-minute status meetings among your team to make sure that nobody's stuck, who's blocked on this. This way, everything keeps moving forward. Then I'll usually stay till a little after dinner because then traffic's a bit better, and then head home. And then I'll work from home a little bit because there's always something that needs to be taken care of.
My day actually pretty much looks like the same as Matthew's. So I normally, but in the morning, I prefer working from home. So I just wake up, around 7 a.m. and then work from my bed and do most of my work. Surprisingly, I get a lot of work done, working from home. And then, at about lunchtime, I just go to work. And then I have lunch at work, and then the work, do some coding, talk to other engineers. Most of the work that we do, we have to collaborate with a lot of other teams, talk to people, do some send out code for review, review other people's work, and then maybe once a week we have a stand-up where we just talk about our progress. And then I normally wait for dinner, which is about 6 p.m. and then just go home. Sometimes I try to go to the gym before going back home, or just do it when I'm at home.
Okay, cool. I'm more of a night person, so I although recently I've been getting to work a little earlier. Traffic's a little bit better, and there's a sweet spot to get to the campus. So I'll usually get into the office, go through email. I get a lot of email through the evening. Working in hardware, we often work with people who aren't local, so we get email from different time zones. Scrub through that, and then usually I have a couple of meetings. We're in a different phase of development right now, so a lot of my meetings are more linking up with other people and just chatting about what's going on and figuring that out. Work through the day, and then I usually grab dinner and head over to the gym. And then head home, and then maybe send out a couple of emails from home. So that's kind of my regular day.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So that definitely got things kick-started. We've got a lot of questions rolling in here. So I did want to start off, these kind of rolled in before we actually went live, and not necessarily a question, but I'm going to kick this over to you, Yinfu, because I heard a story about maybe how many times you applied. So Shreya and Candace both had the same comment, I'm too scared to even apply. And Joshua said, I've applied to over 50 jobs and haven't received any interviews so far. So what do you have to say to that?
Keep trying, guys. Please, please, please don't give up, because if you give up, you are definitely never going to get in. I personally applied for Google internships 3 times before I finally got it. And I don't know if you guys saw on my slide, but when I was in high school, I actually thought engineering was for people who wanted to work on engines. So there comes a time in our lives where, something will click and things will fall into place. So please don't give up and just keep trying.
Cool. And Ryan, this was from yesterday. I apologize. John, I want to direct this one at you. People are asking a little bit about what it's like working in consumer hardware and what that means. So please give us as much as you can.
Yeah. So my job is I'm an embedded software developer. So what that means is I'm working on software that goes on devices that you might use. So that's cell phones or anything else. Watches are popular. The team I work on is a follow-on from Glass, so it's a lot of the people that worked on Google Glass, if you're familiar with that project. So we use consumer hardware to talk about any of those devices that we might want to sell to a consumer, or that a company might want to sell to consumers, and that's the area I work in. And then my primary job is making that work. So there's a lot of technical parts of actually taking components, putting them on boards, and then making something that works. And so my job is a lot of making things work.
That's a good way to put it. Okay, I'm going to toss this up to the group, whoever wants to take this one. Jackson asks, how is success in an engineering role defined and or measured? And that might be different across the board here, but does anybody want to take that?
Yeah, so this is actually an awkward time to ask that because we're all going through performance reviews right now. So we're all actually rather versed in this. There are 3 main criteria Google uses to evaluate this. Impact is the first one. So how much did it help Google? How much did your overall project help Google? How much did you contribute to that project and how successful was it? The second thing is difficulty, right? So how hard of a problem was it for you to solve? And then the third level is leadership. So, and I'm not talking managing people. I'm talking like how much did you set the direction for the components you worked on?
Yeah, and most of that actually like just depends on the level that you're on.
Mm-hmm.
So
cool. Okay, so Irina asked a question, and we've got a couple responses of good question, Irina. So we're going to go with this one. How much experience did you all have before getting a job at Google? And I'd like to kind of hear down the line. So, John, we'll start with you and go down the line the other way.
Yeah, so I came into Google as my 3rd job in the Valley here in Silicon Valley. So I have about 7 years experience in this space coming into Google. So I'm maybe a little different from a few people. I was brought in for a team to work on products, and they needed people with my expertise.
So when I got to Google, I was actually like just a recent graduate. I had 0 experience outside of like school. Most of the experience I got was from like on-campus jobs. I was working for like a department in my school. Just like I started like off like as a help desk and doing like I also did like website development. But that's about like as much experience I had. So it was almost like 0 experience. But Google was a perfect place for me to start.
So I came in with 7 years of experience at a previous job, doing similar work.
And I came in after graduating college with a bachelor degree with a couple internships in the summer.
Awesome. So you can definitely see that there's an array. We will get into it a little bit later, our new grad opportunities. So Sequelia and Yinfu can probably talk a little bit more to those since they came in through new grad opportunities. But both Matt and John talk about it a lot at campus presentations. So we'll jump into those in a little bit. Yinfu, you mentioned your internship experience, and we had a question on here. Oliver asked, did you all have internships prior to interviewing for Google?
So I guess my case is I was actually an intern right before I started full-time. And so I didn't actually do the whole full-time interview. So at Google, if you're an intern and at the end of your internship, you would like to convert to full-time, you only have to do 2 interviews instead of 5. So that's what I did. So getting a Google internship is definitely a good way to go about getting a full-time job. But you don't necessarily have to have one. We get plenty of applicants who are not, who have not interned at Google before. And even if you haven't interned at all, we have programs for you too.
Yeah. And then outside of being a Google intern, did you all hold internships while you were in school outside of Google? And if so, what types of internships were they?
For me, it was just an on-campus job.
Nice.
Yeah.
I worked at a fuel cell company in General Electric.
I didn't have any formal internships. I worked a few summers with a local company that was sort of related in computer science.
Cool. Okay, so we will jump into another question for. So this is from, I'm so sorry if I'm messing up your name here, but it looks like Siohun. Do people who end up working for Google get to choose which department they work for? So let's go to Sequelia for that. What was yours like? And maybe if you have a general response to that also.
So I think it depends. If you have like prior experience, Google sometimes ask you which department you like to work in. In my case, since I was a recent undergrad, they just merged me with the position that they thought I'll be mostly suited for. So that's what ended up happening.
Awesome. Does anybody else have anything to expand on that, or maybe a different experience?
Okay, so when I did it, they did it kind of matching style, where as I was coming in, my recruiter worked with me, and then so I went through a couple extra interviews because I interviewed with several different groups. And then the groups that wanted me sent their positions to the recruiter, and then the recruiter and I went through them and chose one.
I think that's how it generally goes.
Yeah, it's generally a matching thing where, your recruiter will take your interview results. They'll look at what teams have openings inside of Google. The teams will say, "Oh, we want this person," and then he or she will come back to you and say, "Okay, these are the opportunities we've kind of found for you."
Yeah. I'll kind of quickly comment. I came in through kind of a different avenue. So my team was looking for someone with a specific skill set, and we were recruiting directly for that person. So I came in and interviewed with only people who are on the team I work with now and was hired into that team. So it's a slightly different path in the matching. If you have a very specific area and you find the job posting on the website, you can end up in that track where you're looking at a very specific job.
Yeah. So originally when I was applying for a software engineering in site readability. And then so I did my first interview, and then they thought, "Oh, you're not a good match for that position." So they ended up matching me for a general software.
Awesome. Okay, let's see here. So we've gotten a couple questions about actually degrees. So Neil asked, what kind of degrees are you looking for? I've heard rumors that you need to have at least a master's to work at Google. LOL. And then Thajoka122 asks, is a BA in computer science good enough to work at Google? So if maybe somebody could speak to the degree level.
Yep. So I was actually in the middle of getting my master's, and after my internship, I decided, getting a master's probably wouldn't get me as far as a year of experience in industry. Yeah. So I quit my master's program and came to Google right after my bachelor's. And there's actually some team members on my team whose bachelor's degrees are not even in CS. There are physics majors, math majors. I think what Google is looking for is whether you have the technical skills to succeed, regardless of your major.
Awesome.
Yeah, aerospace engineering degree, same thing. Like I didn't have a CS background, but the interviews are very technical, and they'll very quickly figure out if you have the skills to do the job.
Yeah, and we'll just plug this in a couple weeks. Our session will be going over we'll go through a mock technical interview, and you can ask questions about that too. So make sure to RSVP to that one. Okay, let's do this one. Mosin asks, can you tell us the differences that you came across between college projects and the projects that you do at Google, and how do you handle that difference? And I'll let anybody take that one.
So the big difference is your college project has to run once for your professor, and you're the only person that has to ever read the code. In real life, that project has to last for 20 years, and 14 people are going to change it. And you're going to get called at 2 in the morning about it one time because some flag didn't get spelled right. So things that become much more important are making nice, concise modules that are very, very cleanly documented with really pretty variable names. Because those things are what are going to save you 10 years from now when you go to look at that code that you haven't touched in 10 years and wondered who the hell wrote this, and then you realize it was you.
Great answer. I think this kind of segues into Trayvon's question here, asking, are you guys constantly nervous about making mistakes now that something's on such a large scale?
The most nervous I've ever been is right before this panel happened. So
I'm so sorry.
No, it's cool. I think I mentioned earlier, but one of the things I really like about Google is how supportive my teammates are, and your success is not only measured by whether the things you make work or not. There's going to be times where you're experimenting and things break, and one of the models at Google is actually ask for forgiveness, not permission. So you sort of have free reign to go try things out, and if you find out it doesn't work or something's broken, then you let your team know and your team figure it out, and you don't do it again the next time.
Yeah. Most of the time you're actually not the only person looking at the stuff. We have code reviews in place to make sure that we minimize the damage.
Yeah. One thing about that, I mean, my experience is in the real world, we accept that mistakes happen, and that's just a thing. The biggest part about when you make a mistake is just owning that mistake and how you go forward from there. So if you make a mistake, you have to reach out to people who can help you fix it, and you have to own that.
And Google doesn't waste time assigning blame. If something breaks, the only thing people care about are fixing it.
Yeah.
There's no witch hunt. There's no whose fault was this? How are we going to stop this from happening ever again? It's simply, this broke. What can we do to fix it?
Great answer. I feel like you guys were very passionate about that one. So that's really nice to hear from everybody. It's okay to break stuff, I think, is probably the model there. But, like, don't try to. So we've been getting a lot of questions about the languages that you all use when writing code, and then in particular, what languages are good to know when you're going into an interview.
So Google has a few big ones. Java and C++ and Python are pretty much the bigger back-end languages. JavaScript is pretty much the front end. We have our own frameworks around most of that stuff, so you don't necessarily need to focus on the little teeny tiny JavaScript frameworks or this Java framework, because you're probably never going to see it when you're inside of Google, because it just doesn't do what we need it to do. As far as your interviews, I would recommend the more structured languages like the Javas and the C++s versus JavaScript, because there's just so many little nuances to JavaScript that you can get wrong. And if you say, I'm a JavaScript expert, then the person that's interviewing might have written the book you read about JavaScript. And I've seen this happen, and they'll ask you some obscure questions just to see.
Yeah.
So don't list expert unless you can say you wrote a book about this.
Yeah.
And I would also recommend Python for interviews.
Yes.
Because it's very easy for whiteboard coding. You don't have to remember the curly braces or the semicolons. It's very readable.
Yeah, some teams use Go as well.
Yeah, some teams do use that. So just pick a language that you're more comfortable with. Whatever your favorite one is, and that's pretty much going to cover it. But the only warning is, if you're going to use JavaScript, make sure you're very clean about what you write.
Yeah. As a different perspective on that, in my space where you're working on small systems, C is pretty much our bread and butter. So if that was an area you're targeting to go into, that would be the language we would expect you to work in.
Yeah, and from a recruiter's point of view, I will just add to that again, whatever you put on your resume is fair game, but you can work with your recruiter to let them know what language you're most comfortable interviewing in, and they'll do their best to match you with an interviewer or an engineer who's comfortable coding in that language as well. So don't try and tailor yourself to the language that you think is going to be best. You want to go into your interview in the one you're most confident in. Okay. Let's gear some questions over here. People are getting, now the interview process seems to be a hot topic and prepping for that. So this is from Heather. She asked us a little bit earlier. What is the best piece of advice you could give us in order to get a job at Google or even get an interview at Google? So that one's really vague. I might take it as what could you personally recommend? Or maybe go back and tell yourself at this point in time.
So getting an interview is generally a function of your resume, right? Because that's the only piece of information we're going to have at that point. So you want to make sure to highlight the most important few things about you, nice and cleanly at the top of the resume. So here's some awesome project I did. Don't just list a chronological history of what you did, and the top half of the page should be your 3 biggest accomplishments over the last several years, the things you're most proud of. And it doesn't have to be academic. You could be president of a club, or you raised $1 million for cancer, or who knows what. But whatever you're excited about, make sure it's front and center on the top of that resume. You don't necessarily need to go into your high school employment, because the recruiter's only going to have, say, a minute or so to actually read your resume and then make a decision whether they're going to go forward with it or not. So you want to get their attention first and then hold it.
And Matt, why don't you were talking about this before we went on the panel live today, but about how we look at resumes actually.
Yeah. Oh, and that's the other thing is, unlike a lot of companies, Google has a human look at every resume we get. And that's an astounding number of resumes. So like I said, you have about a minute of the recruiter's attention, to grab it and have them click, okay, yes, I want this one, and swipe you in, and then, you'll get queued up for a phone interview. If you get selected for an interview, the biggest advice I can give you is practice, right? Yeah. Practice writing a program in a Google Doc. Go find yourself your favorite computer science textbook and reread some basic algorithms and just actually implement them in a Google Doc and then copy and paste them into Eclipse or whatever you want to use and make sure it runs. Because that's a very tricky thing, and a lot of people stumble when they get into that world because they don't have autocomplete and they don't have indentations and they don't have parentheses being highlighted and the colors are not there, right? Like, make sure you can cut that cord.
And I've got a general piece of advice. This doesn't necessarily only apply to technical interviews, but apply for some jobs that you care a little less about and sort of practice a real-world interview on those companies first.
So like one advice someone gave me when I was doing my interview is that the recruiters and the engineers who will be interviewing you, they actually want you to get hired. So that should tell you that most of your job you should just during the interview process is just give them the reason why you should be hired. And what happens in my experience is that you see a lot of really good engineer candidates who are really nervous during the interview and they cannot really talk properly or maybe communicate their ideas, and that becomes a problem because you don't get to give the interviewer or maybe the recruiter what you actually made of. So just be confident. Google already wants to hire you.
Yeah, as an interviewer, a comment kind of related to that is a big thing once you're in that interview process is talking, is reasoning out everything you're thinking. So when we're doing technical interviews and we're asking you to go through a problem, even if you're struggling, knowing how you're thinking through that problem is very important to us, because even if you are a little off the solution or something's not quite right, if we can understand how you think through a problem, that's more valuable to us, and that's what we're looking for. That's what we're going to write feedback on is the problem solving and the process, and less of the did they get every single semicolon and angle bracket in the correct place.
And actually on that note, John, Patrick asked, what does Google value more in code, readability or brevity? And I think maybe let's apply that specifically to the interview.
Brief code is generally more readable. You generally don't want to be the one that knows the world's most obscure JavaScript conversion to get a string into an integer, though.
Yeah.
So, it should be apparent what you're doing, and you should be doing it in as few lines as possible.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
Good software engineers are lazy. The fewer lines of code you have, the fewer bugs are in that code. And the other thing about the interviews, too, is you're going to get a lot of interviews, and people might think we're looking for you to fail. But for the most part, the hiring committees are looking for which interviews you did the best in. They're not like, oh, he really bombed that interview. He just doesn't get graph theory. Well, great. We've got lots of things that don't involve graph theory. We're looking for you to knock one or two of those interviews out of the park, because then we know what you're an expert in.
Okay, cool. I'm going to do one more question, and then we will jump into our new grad roles that we offer at Google. So this comes from Christina, and she asked, do you expect a certain level of knowledge and experience, or do you provide training on the job? So I guess we can take that as face value. Yunfu, do you have anything to say for that?
From my perspective, I think it's training on the job, because there's a lot of Google technologies that are specific to Google that no other companies use. And no matter how many years of experience you have, you will have to learn those anyway. So I think that demonstrating that you are willing to learn and can learn quickly is a plus.
Cool.
Yeah. I want to just, adding on to that, the first week as a new engineer at Google is all training classes. And those are just introductory classes to different areas of technology. And for any given area, there's more classes you can take. So, there's a lot of on-the-job training as long as you have the base technical skills.
All right, let's take this time to dive into the positions that we offer here at Google. These are specifically for new grad-related roles. You can see us as want to join us as an engineer. These are legitimately the 4 pillars that we look at during interviewing. So we'll go over this again in some of our later sessions, but always good to kind of keep these in mind. One other thing that I do want to say about these roles is that these roles are created and intended for people just graduating from university. We do have different levels, undergrad, master's, PhD, but that's all taken into consideration when you're applying and when you're interviewing. So I just want to make sure nobody thinks that when they're interviewing or applying, they're going up against somebody who's been in the industry for 7 years or something like that, or even really going up against anybody. It's just a matter of how well you personally perform. So with that being said, let's dive into our most common new grad role by far, which is the general software engineer role. And I think Yinfu's talking about that one.
All right, so as Jesse mentioned, the software engineer is probably the most popular role at Google. I'm a software engineer, and software engineers do all kinds of things. You work on different teams on Google doing different things, and oftentimes you have the opportunity to switch to a different team if you choose to within a couple years or so. Google likes its engineers to go around and explore different things.
Awesome. Okay, and then our next one is the engineering residency program.
So the engineering residency program are targeted for people who have a strong academic background but maybe don't have enough industry experience. So what you'll do is you'll spend a year at Google doing the residency program, where we'll catch you up on like an industry-specific tools and Google-specific tools, and that takes a few weeks, and then you'll be matched with a team, a real team at Google doing a rotation for a few months, and after that you have an opportunity to switch into a full-time role with that team. And my team actually had an Eng resident who converted full-time last year, and this year we have 2 Eng residents joining us, so this is definitely a real thing.
Okay, and actually before we dive into the next one, I think from showing that first slide of the 4 pillars, people are really, really interested in what the heck we mean by Googliness. And I know that there's not one definition, but does anybody have a little spiel on Googliness that they would like to share, or have ever heard a good definition of it?
Don't be evil.
Yeah, just weird enough to be interesting.
I like that. Yeah, you'll hear it described a lot of different ways at Google, so that's actually a question that's brought up even when you get here. But it is interesting, I feel like, when you work here, everybody does have sort of that googly factor as we describe about it, and I think it's just, you know, you like being here, you're a good person, you're not being evil, and you're passionate about the work that you're doing.
And most of it is just like taking leadership of like whatever you're working on. So Google is really like interested in that, people like taking initiatives and making stuff happen.
Yeah. And a way to show it on your resume, I know at a lot of other companies they might discourage you from putting like an other interest section or something like that, but we love to see that at the end of a resume. Love to see sort of like a well-rounded person and want to hear about your interests and things like that, so feel free to always throw that at the bottom. Okay, and with that, that was just a really hot topic in the chat, so I wanted to address it, but let's go ahead and dive into our next role. Site reliability engineer.
Okay, so site reliability engineers can work in a few different capacities. One of the more popular ones is they're the ones that actually keep the data centers up and running, so they're responsible for setting up the hardware, doing the networking, making sure the power supplies are up and running. Additionally, the site reliability engineers are the ones that actually push code out to production. They're the ones that get paged if something goes horribly wrong, and they do the rollbacks. These are like the system administrators and other lingo. They're the ones that keep everything running and also write the tools to make sure things keep running. So it's not just simply they're plugging and playing things. They're literally writing the tools that allow data centers to come online and come offline and switch data and move things over and migrate your session without you even knowing that we took Atlanta offline for whatever reason.
Cool, and let's move right along. I believe our next one is software engineer tools and infrastructure, fondly referred to as SETI here.
Yeah, so that's me over there. I'm actually like very passionate about this one. So like as a tools and infrastructure engineer, you'll be responsible for like making sure that like the Google products are awesome. Making sure that like if like there are flaws in the products, you find them, and then like bugs, you fix them. So like the main role of like these people is just you want to make sure that like developers are not spending like the same amount of effort in different teams doing the same thing. you want to like improve like the developers like productivity. So if like a team like needs like this button to look this way, and then another team like needs this button look another way, you'll be like the team like to provide like a reusable component. Like in Google, we use like the same code base. We want to make sure that like when different engineers submit their code, everything like works smoothly. Like another engineer will be able to see like the changes like right away. All the tests are passing. So as a tools and infrastructure engineer, you are making sure that like things are running smoothly at Google. Like the products that like you are checking out, you're shipping to customers, like are up to like really good standards. They conform to like the privacy standards that like Google expects, privacy, security, and all those kinds of things. So it's really an awesome role.
Great. And then we will round it out with 3 more of our roles that these ones we hire for in sort of smaller quantities than the others, but nevertheless do have new grad roles. So Associate Product Manager.
An associate product manager. So you can think of it like as a transition to like a product manager, which are people who are actually like making like really important like decisions at Google. So as a product manager, like you'll be like you're being trained to be the person like who will be like planning like the execution cycle of a product. By being trained, I mean like at Google, like everyone is expected like to actually like contribute good quality of work. So you will be planning like starting from like just planning the product in the inception of everything, like getting like UX like user experience like feedback, like getting someone to work on that. You'll be like working with other teams to actually like making sure that like whatever you have in mind is actually feasible. You'll be working towards at Google, like we have a lot of things that we need to do, so you want to make sure that like you prioritize them accordingly. And this program that like we provide for like the associate product manager is a 2-year program. So it's a 2-year rotation program where like you spend a year in one team. So like you have like 2 rotations. Yeah, it's awesome. You should check it out.
Awesome. Okay, and then our last few over here, user experience and UX.
Yeah, so user experience and UX, we have a couple of different roles under there. There's UX designer, UX engineer, and UX researcher. So at Google, we have a big priority about the customer and making sure that the customer is first. So UX designers contribute in making sure that those interactions and how people use Google products make sense. Our UX engineers are responsible for researching, prototyping and developing how these things look, figuring out what will work. And then we have UX researchers who actually do larger scale studies and take a look at how people use things, whether or not different interactions really work with a larger base of people, often working with people all the way across Google campus to get a diverse sample.
Awesome. And last but not least, we have our quantitative analyst role.
Yeah, so this is, as best I can tell, the statistics geeks. This is people whom are really comfortable with huge amounts of data, looking at validating whether or not features are working on our different products. These are people whom our background is master's or PhD in statistics or computer science. So really digging in there with all of the data that Google has and understanding how things work.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for diving into that. We've definitely had some questions sort of boil up as that's been going on. So this one is actually from earlier. This is from William, and he says, I just started a BS in computer science in college up in Chico, California, and I'm just wondering what advice do you guys have for a college freshman interested in working in places like Google? So thinking about this from a freshman perspective.
We have a special internship program called the Engineering Practicum, which is targeted towards freshmen and sophomores. So I would definitely recommend you check that out. And I believe other companies might have similar programs as well. So you're never too early to start on an internship.
The other thing is find a club in your school.
Yes.
And make a web page or make a tool or do something interesting for it. Like, you know, like the things you're learning in school are like putting tools in a toolbox. As soon as you have one, try it. Find an excuse to write something or build something, because you'll learn a lot more actually making something that has to work than you will reading a book or, you know, solving little problems your professor gives you.
Another thing along that lines, I have several colleagues who are really successful signing up for Code Jam. So get involved in that. It's a good way to get your name kind of out there. If you do really well, people will be interested in reaching out to you, or, you know, if you subsequently apply, there's already kind of this history that Google knows about you and has seen kind of some of your work.
Cool. And this one comes from Katie. Are there a lot of opportunities to rise up in titles, say going from software developer to developer manager? And yeah, maybe if you all could just speak to sort of like the movement within Google as well.
So Google has a large number of ladders. That's, I guess, the best way to describe it. So there's like the software engineering ladder, and then you have the product manager ladder, and then there's actually people management as its own separate ladder. So you can move up in your ladder, or you can laterally jump over to different ladders. And that's all relatively easy to do. Obviously, going up for promotion's trickier, but if you wanted to like find a different role, my recommendation is you do what's called 20% time, which is at Google, we're allowed to spend 20% of our time working on anything that would benefit Google. So you can find another team and volunteer to help. You can come up with your own project and get it approved. And then this way, if you're interested in being, say, a people manager or a product manager or a recruiter or being on a panel like this, you kind of get in touch with someone and give it a shot.
Do any of you have any 20% projects that you're allowed to talk about that you might want to share with the group?
My main 20% focus, it's not really official, but I do a lot of like outreach and recruiting stuff. So this and doing virtual presentations for schools, and then on-campus recruiting and interviews and things like that. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, Yinfu, this one is actually for you specifically. This comes from this comes from Maybe and was kind of +1 by a couple people in there. Can you please tell me what your experience has been like as a woman engineer at Google? And then specifically, do you ever feel uncomfortable? And if you do, what do you do about it?
So, I was kind of expecting this. This always comes up for me, probably because I am female. So I'm not going to lie to you. The numbers are pretty much the same across the industry. It's like somewhere between 15 and 20% of engineers are female. So that's kind of a small number. But the people here are very nice, and everybody at Google are encouraged to take a class called Unconscious Bias, where we have to basically make sure that when you're making decisions and when you're talking in a meeting or something, make sure that what you're saying is targeted at the idea and not the person and like their background. And my experience here has been pretty great, actually.
Awesome. Okay, and then sort of switching gears here. Adrian Y asks, what is more important when trying to be a Googler, GPA or experience? I can take it if anybody wants to.
I was going to say probably experience. I think I remember reading somewhere that we did some research and GPA wasn't highly correlated with your performance metrics about a year after being hired. I'm willing to bet that there's a line that's like, you have to be above this.
There's not, actually.
There's not?
Yeah,
okay.
Wait. I'm cutting you up. There's not.
Okay. Yeah, that was speculation on my part. But I remember reading the presentation that basically said that GPA wasn't very predictive of your likelihood to succeed at Google.
Yeah, and we'll expand on this in our resume talk in a couple weeks. We do want you to definitely include your GPA on your resume. Reason being, if it's not there, that's kind of, creates a big question mark of why isn't there, and it might be easy to assume that it's rather low. But if it is there, then you can speak to it. If you're worried about your GPA being a little lower than usual, we absolutely look at your experience and we look through your whole resume. I know we were saying, only a minute per resume or something like that, but a human does read through it, and it's easy to see why a GPA might be a little bit lower. We also do a good amount of research into the schools and things that you're coming from. So while, a GPA at one school might mean one thing, it might not mean that at another university, and we take that absolutely into consideration. So while you should definitely work hard in your classes, make sure you're getting that experience outside of class too, because that one takes up a larger chunk of your resume and is something we definitely look at.
And my personal tip is don't worry about maybe like the art class or English class where you got like a C in. So if your technical or major GPA is higher than your overall GPA, you can feel free to put that down as well.
Okay, cool. On sort of that topic here, just in classes wise, Alec asked what type of computer science courses would best prepare you for working at Google. So you don't need to list specific course names, considering they're probably different from school to school, but were there any that really helped you out in school?
Algorithms and data structures are kind of
Yes.
your biggest ones. Don't take classes where you're going to learn a tiny framework, right? Like algorithms, data structures, and a nice overview of machine learning, and you're pretty well covered.
Yeah.
You should be able to eat, sleep, and breathe big O notation, and you should know the sorting algorithms, the graph algorithms. You should be able to implement your own hash map. You should be able to implement a linked list. Know how those pieces work and be able to build them in a couple different languages, and you'll be okay.
If you're targeting something more OS type, embedded, or working on kernel, then operating systems classes are going to be really important. Concurrency, and then if your school has anything that deals with lower level concepts like assembly language, or if you can get into an electrical engineering class and take some Vlsi and those other things to get a real understanding of how computers really work, if that's where your interest area is.
And maybe one with database. A lot of programming is glorified, move data from here to there. So learn how to store data.
Okay, and then this question actually acts as a perfect segue, so thank you, Swapnil. What is the typical interview process like at Google? So we actually have some slides prepared for that. So we're going to show you this. This is basically what your interview experience would look like if you're applying for a full-time role. So there is first a coding sample or survey sent over to you. I don't want this to intimidate anybody. You do have to take it, but it's basically just to get a read on if you know how to code or not. After that, there's about 2 to 3 phone interviews where you will be coding in a Google Doc with a Google engineer on the other end of the phone. After that, there's about 3 to 4 on-site interviews where you're actually brought on campus where you would likely be working. And then that's when you have your whiteboard interviews. So you'll be coding on whiteboards. We also ask, other questions outside of that, but coding is the biggest part for the software engineering role. After that, you're done, but all of the feedback goes into a committee review to make sure there's no bias in there whatsoever. It's seen by a lot of people. And then ultimately that leads to an offer. So that's the behind the scenes process. It's a little bit different for our internships. So this is what it looks like for internships. There's a coding sample and survey. This is fairly new. So what's actually a little funny about this is that you might not get this, but you might get this. They're starting it off, I think, kind of at random with some folks are selected, some aren't. So if you do get it, do it. It's definitely mandatory if you do get it. And then after that, you have about 2 to 3 phone interviews, and then you are done. So if you're going for the internship, the biggest thing to practice is getting comfortable working in a Google Doc and talking over the phone. After that, though, on our end, it goes through an engineering review and a host matching process. So matching you with somebody who's working on a project you're interested in, then to a committee review, and then to an offer. And last but not least, if you're actually wondering how to apply to any of this stuff, this is how you do it. So g.co/student careers is where you can go to find the best roles for you. All you need to do is upload your resume and transcript. We need your transcript. We need your resume. What's nice is that we don't ask for cover letters. We don't want them. So you don't have to stress out about a cover letter. And then you click submit and you're done. So it's a super easy application process. Some of the programs might require something a little bit more, but it's nothing too bad. Usually it's just this for almost all the roles that we've talked about today. Let me hop into chat really quickly and see if there's anything else we want to jump into. This is since we're just on the interview one. Daniel does ask, if you get an interview, how much did you all prepare for your interviews? And I know for you two it might be a little bit different since you didn't come in on the new grad role, but maybe advice you could give to a new grad for preparing for their interviews.
Algorithms.
Yeah, brush up on algorithms, data structures, code in a Google Doc.
If you're doing on-site interviews, code
do
on
it,
the
yeah,
whiteboard.
do it on a whiteboard.
Yes.
Find yourself a
Very
whiteboard, write it.
I did a lot of like the preparations because I wasn't like confident in my programming. So like I read like a couple of books. One is like how to crack like the software engineering interview questions. Another one is about data structures. Other ones was like programming like for like game programmers or something like that. So it was pretty good.
Awesome. All right, well, we are just about at time, and I want to maybe give everybody a couple minutes of their day back, but we want to genuinely thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you hopefully soon. Bye, everybody.